It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Phil. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Phil. So glad you're joining us. For the next half hour or so, we're going to be talking to a military guy that's at UofL. We're going to be talking to a couple of folks who visited UofL and gave some important speeches. And I interviewed those two speakers, and we'll talk to them here a little bit later on the show. So one of those coming up a little bit later. UofL, as I said, brings in some terrific world-renowned speakers, and just about every presentation is open to the public. You can go see these folks. And that was the case the past few weeks when a 22-year-old defector from North Korea and one of the foremost authorities on looting and antiquity thefts in the Middle East were at UofL. And I'll have interviews with both of those young ladies. But first, the University of Louisville is well known for being a military-friendly school. I think we've been judged a military-friendly school by a website for 7 straight years now, I believe. And each year, UofL hosts someone from the Army's top brass as a War College Fellow. Colonel Archie Herndon is that guy this school year. He's essentially a student at the University of Louisville, learning how to be a better leader in the Army. He's a decorated soldier who has served all over the world, and now he's in Louisville. Welcome, Colonel. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here at the University of Louisville.
You enjoying it so far?
Oh, very, very much so. It's a great campus, very outgoing campus. Was my top choice of places to attend for the Senior Service College, so that was great. But yeah, I've had a great time here in the short time that I've already been here.
Great. And so tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get here, and where have you served? I looked at your resume. You've been all over the world, but how did you wind up here in Louisville?
Well, I've spent two tours at Fort Knox. One as a Lieutenant Colonel Assignment Officer for logistics lieutenant colonels, and then again as the branch chief that oversaw basically my old position. So it exposed me to Louisville, the city, and you can't be exposed to Louisville, the city, without being exposed to the University of Louisville. And it's such a great campus, and then the city itself has so much culture, so many things to do here. So it was very easy for me to sit there and say, hey, I'd really like to do the University of Louisville Fellowship. And
a little bit about yourself. I saw you did a couple tours in Iraq, I think. Yes. You've been in Germany, some other places. Where have you been in the world, and what have you done?
Well, I'm a logistics officer by trade. However, my background is actually a little more diverse than that. I started my career at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, jumping out of airplanes and pushing things out of airplanes. So that was a great time. And once you drink the Kool-Aid, you believe you're invincible. So from there, I went to Germany, spent 6 years in Germany, and that exposed me to locations like Bosnia, Macedonia, Kosovo. So I got to see a little bit of that part of the world. And then I've had 3 tours in Iraq, about 39 months total time there, to include the invasion, and then a tour in Afghanistan also, where I commanded a battalion, both in South and Eastern Afghanistan. So.
I said you were Army brass. Is that a fitting description of you?
It is at this point. I am part of the them now.
You're part of the them now. Tell us what a War College Fellow is. What is that?
Well, every year the Army selects approximately 350 officers to attend their strategic professional education program, known as the Army War College. And within that, they're segmented into a couple other programs, to include sister services, where we send some of our officers to the Air Force, Marines, the Navy. We have a strategic fellowship that does basically think tank type of things for the Chief of Staff Army. And then we have the fellows that go to the various universities across the United States. And there are approximately 90 total. Only 80 of us are attending the university type fellowships, and I happen to be one of those 80. So.
Okay. And what do you hope to learn at the University of Louisville?
Oh, as much as possible. The thing I've learned just in the 3 weeks here at the University of Louisville, the classes I'm taking are actually within leadership. The classes, strategic thinking, very similar to what the curriculum would be there at the Carlisle Barracks. But I've also been exposed to things that aren't in classes, like the School of Engineering, where they're doing so much partnership with the city itself in regards to logistics. So it allows me to sit there and not only focus on strategic problems, but also my core requirements as a logistician in the Army. So.
We're talking to Colonel Archie Herndon, who is from the U.S. Army, and he is the War College Fellow at the University of Louisville this year, as you just heard him say, one of 80 that are at universities across the United States. And what classes are you taking right now? And are you in those classes with, average college students, 20-year-old kids?
I am actually. Well, I'm taking a leadership course over the Criminal Justice Department. And that's actually partnered with the Southern Police Institute. It's a great course because it actually gives me a leadership perspective from 35 police officers across the United States. And they have a very unique problem set. They not only have their organizational leadership requirements, but then they also have their the requirement of how do I lead within a community. So that provides me a very unique perspective that I wouldn't get in an Army leadership course, for example. I'm taking an international relations theory course in the political science department. Great course. I'm in there. It's a seminar. There's 8 of us. There's no hiding. So,
so the teacher's calling on you to talk a little bit, huh, the professor?
Absolutely. And, it's incredible to actually see the caliber of students in all my classes, and the seminar class especially. Very engaged, very willing to sit there and provide their perspective as to what's going on in the world and why those things are actually happening. And then the last course I'm taking is actually in talent management and acquisition in the Education and Human Development College. And that ties kind of to my interest in developing our future leaders within the Army, and how do we identify those officers specifically, and then how do we develop them across 20 years of service in the military. So.
Is the Army hoping you will take this training and this education and go back and train other officers, or are they hoping that you will use this and apply this on the ground somewhere in the world as part of the U.S. Army?
Both.
Okay.
The expectation is that I actually do both. I've been selected to command an 06, a colonel command in Florida following my time here at UofL. So I'll actually take the lessons I have here and apply it to the organization that I'll command in the Army next year. But there also is an expectation that I apply what I learned here and populate that across the servicemen and women that I come across on a day-to-day basis. So.
And in these classes you're taking, these 3 classes you're taking, have you found some folks who don't necessarily have the military view that you have some interesting discussions? So I know you've only been on campus, about a month or so,
Yes.
but have you had some interesting discussions with some of the students at UofL about the role of the Army and the leadership of the Army?
Absolutely, and that's one of the fun parts of doing a fellowship versus going to what we call the brick and mortar school there in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, is the different ideas and the different expectations of the military from the students here at UofL, and it's a lot of fun, to be frank with you, between the students that I engage on a day-to-day basis in my classes, but also the scholars there at the McConnell Center, which is a co-sponsor of this program. So it's a lot of fun, and it also speaks to the caliber of student that comes to Louisville, to be frank with you, because they have very intelligent points, and they make those points in a way that forces us to sit there and think of these problems in a different way. So,
again, we're talking to Colonel Archie Herndon from the U.S. Army, and who's the War College Fellow at UofL this semester. Or this year, right? Is it a semester or is it a year?
The full year.
Full year. So you'll be hanging around the Belknap campus for a little while.
Yes.
What have been some of the interesting discussions, perhaps, that you have had in your classes at the University of Louisville? And as part of those, I said early in the setup that we are a military-friendly school. There are, I think, about 700 veterans that currently go to school full-time at the University of Louisville. Have you had those conversations with any other veterans at UofL in those classes, or even on campus wandering around?
Actually, yes. One of the classes I'm taking, the Talent Acquisition and Management class, has some veterans that are in that. As a matter of fact, it's probably about 50% of the class that has veterans enrolled in that one. And we've had some pretty good discussions on how we actually identify people to serve in the military, and then how we develop them. So we've had engagements that target the military specifically. In my police course, we sit there and we look at specific military leaders, and we dissect their leadership style. And that has been a lot of fun. We've actually we got together on a Saturday and went down to Fort Knox, visited the Patton Museum, and then we talked about Patton and some of the leadership styles that he actually used in his time in the military. And then my international relations theory course is that class specifically, we start to talk about the application of the military and how we use the military in today's
warfare?
Yeah. Well, in warfare more, and policy.
Policy, tactical?
Yes.
What would you tell people that you meet that are, I don't know, at the University of Louisville or just people on the street about the difference in the way the Army thinks today than when they thought, and how they develop leaders, and what the tactics were when you first entered the Army? What's the difference today versus, I don't know, 25 years ago? When did you enter the Army?
Oh, that's close. About 22 years ago.
That was close.
Well, the Army really has evolved into an organization that is trying to become more familiar with how we do things in the civilian world as well, and take the lessons that we've actually learned in the civilian world and incorporate them into our own profession. So that's one thing. You'll start to see a lot of programs that we call broadening programs that allow us to go out and do engagements at universities like University of Louisville, but also training with industry. University of Louisville this year is sponsoring the first training with industry officers that's actually working here at the university. And then there's also another officer working at UPS for a year that's going to take those lessons and bring them back. So I think we've expanded our understanding of what benefits exist outside the military's education program, and we're trying to populate the military with those programs.
Very good. Colonel R.G. Herndon, we're glad you're at University of Louisville. Maybe we'll have you on in the spring so you can talk about what you've learned or haven't learned at the University of Louisville. How about that?
Oh, that'd be great, Mark. I really appreciate it. And you talked earlier in regards to some of the things that the university actually being a pro-military university, and it absolutely is. There's some events coming up here in the next 2 months, actually, that kind of speak to that. The volleyball military appreciation game that's on the Friday the 28th. Then there's a 5K run on campus on November 6th, and then there's the UofL Military Appreciation Football game on the 12th of November. And, UofL football is doing phenomenal this year, so it should be
it's
a
a pretty good deal for those soldiers at Fort Knox that'll get to come up here and get the tickets to come watch a football game at UofL right now.
Absolutely.
All right, Archie, appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. In mid-September, the John Schnatter Center for Free Enterprise and the Business School at the University of Louisville hosted Yeonmi Park, a Columbia University student who escaped from North Korea 9 years ago. Park talked about her experience before a packed auditorium at UofL. She also sat down to chat with me as well. Here's that interview. I'm here with Yeonmi, who is at the University of Louisville getting ready to make a speech at UofL, and she is a North Korean defector. Yes, she's only 21 years old, and she is very young, and at a very super young age, you left North Korea, correct?
Yes.
So tell us about that journey. How did you get out of North Korea, and why did you and your family leave North Korea?
I think so. First of all, I'm 22 now.
22, all right.
Yes.
Well, I didn't want to short you 1 year.
Thank you for that. I think it's really why I left the country. What drove me was not the idea of being free or coming to America. It's very simple as it was. Just I was very hungry, and so when you're like in firehouse, you don't really think about too much. You just jump off, right? Unless you're gonna die. So that's I think what we did with my mother and I, like 2007.
Okay.
Because we were just so hungry, so we had to escape.
But it's very rare for people to get out of North Korea.
It's very hard, I think. People want to escape, but it's very hard.
You think people really do want to leave North Korea, or are most North Koreans happy with the life that they have?
So it's no one say the truth. So
Okay.
being in North Korea is almost
Right.
like living in the Truman Show. No one tells you whatever. I don't know. I have no idea if anyone told me the truth. But all I could feel was the desperation. I'm sure people knew the world could be this way. They would wanted to leave. But some people they had no idea. They are so brainwashed. So they didn't see any option. So that's why they stayed there. Or some people, even though they want to escape, but the country's not allow them. I never knew what passport was. So there's no way we thought about it. It was possible for us to escape from North Korea.
That thought doesn't even occur to you
No.
because you just haven't heard of it before and didn't know
Right.
what the outside world was thinking, right?
Right.
So you were 13 years old at the time. You and your mom managed to get out of North Korea, but it wasn't simply, hey, let's just cross the border, hop in our car, and leave. So talk a little bit about how that happened and how you eventually got to a country that was free, because you had to go into China first, right?
Right. So it's a long story, so that's why I
Give
wrote
me the
a
Reader's
book.
Digest version. That means
Right.
the short version. So.
So basically, once North Korean defectors crossed the river successfully, not get shot by the guards, the option they got in China is being sold as a slave. So China had a one-child policy, and they didn't have enough girls in the rural areas. And these men in the countryside couldn't find their wives, and they demanded North Korean women as their wives. So 80% of North Korean defector women are being victimized by this human trafficking.
So they're slaves, basically, to these
Right.
men in China, correct?
Right, so that's, my mother was being sold at like less than $100, and my price was less than $300. And that's how I survived in China as a slave. And we crossed the Gobi Desert to Mongolia in the winter, and we followed the Northern Star there. Somehow we survived again in Mongolia, and I became free in end of 2009 at the age of 15, I think.
So you've lived several lifetimes here. You've
Yeah,
lived
more
in a
than 1,000 years.
And a hellish lifetime between the ages of what, 13 and what were you?
To 15.
To 15. So for 2 years you were essentially a slave to a man in China, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then you eventually get through Mongolia. And where did you wind up? What country did you wind up in that you eventually could declare yourself as free?
I ended up in South Korea.
Okay.
And that's the first time I learned about world freedom. So I consider myself, I was reborn again, and I became a new human being since then.
And then you decided to take on this fight for human rights and to tell the story of people in North Korea. What do you tell folks? What are you going to tell the students at the University of Louisville today when you make your speech?
I have no idea.
You're supposed to know these things before you start
I
to speak.
know,
That's how this works.
that's how it works,
Okay.
right? It's really all depends how my mood goes. No, it's really depends on the audience, how much they know about the country. So I think the first thing, always my message is very consistent, that we often forget that even the media portray North Korea as a different universe almost. People don't imagine necessarily that the people in North Korea like us. The very common question that I get at Columbia right now, I'm studying there, and once they find out I'm North Korean defector, they say, wow, you look just like me. And I tell them, like, yeah, I look just like you. And just we forget, we are all the same human beings. And that's why we have to work on this. That's why we have to free this country. So that's my message, that I hope people understand that their oppression also matters to us.
We're talking with Yeonmi Park, who is a defector from North Korea. She's now 22 years old in the United States at Columbia University, and talking about her experiences with us here at the University of Louisville. What do you tell people when they ask you, hey, how come they don't get how come they don't all get Facebook in North Korea and Twitter, and they can just go to any webpage they want? The internet's ubiquitous. Why don't they just look and see what's going on in the rest of the world and say, the heck with this dictator, I'm getting out of here? Why doesn't that happen?
First of all, we don't have electricity, so you cannot charge the phone. And also, I mean, how the dictator controls the country is through the information and the starvation. He disconnect the whole, that's why we call it Hermit Kingdom. We don't have 24 hours electricity in the countryside. I'm sure Kim Jong-un has everything, but not us. We don't have that. And we don't know the existence of internet. So people don't know what internet is. And there's no freedom of movement. And of course, we don't have freedom of speech.
Right.
So if you do anything wrong against the regime, 3 generations of your family get punished for that, like 3 generations.
So your child, if you do something as an adult to protest, what you're saying is your son, daughter, and potentially your granddaughter could be
Right.
punished, thrown in jail,
Yes, or execution.
or executed.
Yes,
That bad, huh?
that's everyday's life.
See, we don't
People
hear about that in the United States, that it goes that deep into a family if one member of the family protests.
That's it's like unimaginable. It's like there's no way I can describe what's happening in North Korea with our human words. And I don't know like when we are gonna learn about it and gonna think why we have it done in this age.
So you're spreading the news about North Korea and what is actually happening there. What do you hope happens in the United States with these students that you're talking to at the University of Louisville and others? What do you hope we do?
So there are things we can do. Like one is grassroots level, that we can get information inside North Korea through borders, or sending balloons, like West Germany or Eastern Germany used sending balloons and getting information inside the country. That's what we can do right now, to tell them the truth. That's not how human beings should be treated, and how the world actually is, that Americans are not bastards. I think that's what we can do, first of all. And the second is also, is very people don't care about it, or just don't know anything about the issue, even though it's a big threat to us. That North Korea, Kim Jong-un now has really powerful nuclear weapon that is direct threat to everyone in this earth. And we don't take him seriously. I don't know what he possibly can do for us to see him serious guy, right?
Well, I think honestly that some Americans are taking North Korea a little bit more seriously, because they are testing nuclear weapons, but
Right.
perhaps not before that, and perhaps not taking the human rights issues as seriously as you obviously do. So you think that's the issue here?
Yeah, I think, just awareness, that's too later. And I don't blame them, because we cannot go there and see what's happening, right? Because North Korea regime not only controls the people's information inside the country, but they control our information here too. That's why it is disconnected between North Korean people and the world. So I hope there are not only me, there are my fellow defectors came out, they are bravely speaking out, getting information despite the assassination attempt by the North Korean regime. We hope we get to hear these stories and can work with defectors. And that's my hope, that there's a way we can do, we can solve this problem together.
Very good. Yeonmi Park, thanks for joining us, and thanks for being at the University of Louisville. Appreciate
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mark Hebert has done research on the looting of ancient sites in the Middle East and how those looted items wind up in legal markets across the world. The UofL College of Arts and Sciences Anthropology Department and Middle East and Islamic Studies programs invited her to speak at UofL, and I also interviewed her. Here is that interview with Morag Kersel. We're here with Morag Kersel, who is an assistant professor of history at DePaul University in Chicago, and she is speaking on the day that we're taping this at the University of Louisville, and she's talking about artifacts in the Middle East and the looting of those artifacts.
I am.
Well, welcome to Louisville, first off.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and I will just say that I was just promoted to associate professor recently, and I'm in the Department of Anthropology.
Okay, well, so we got that straightened around. All right, not in history and anthropology. So what do you do? What's your research, and what are you going to be talking about at the university?
So I'm here as part of the Archaeological Institute of America lecture series, and there will be upcoming lectures. I'm just the first. And I am today speaking about why people want to own Holy Land artifacts. And the results of people wanting to own artifacts sometimes means that sites get looted, or museums get, there's theft from museums in order to meet that demand. So today I'm going to talk about why people want to own things, how those things go from the ground, so the archaeological objects and sites from the ground to the consumer. So the average tourist visiting the Holy Land, what they buy, why they buy it, how much they pay for it, and where it comes from.
So this isn't black market sales, this is
No, this is legitimately available material. Tomorrow, either one of us could fly to Israel, we could go to a licensed shop, and we could buy something, get an export license, and bring it home.
Wow.
So we are talking about the legitimately available artifacts in the market. Although we will talk about a little bit how recently looted material enters that market through a laundering system. So there are illegal elements to the market, but for the most part it's legal.
Okay, and you have concentrated your work, as I understand it, in Jordan, correct?
Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian territories.
Okay, so what do you find when you go into those areas? I mean, it seems like, you know, archaeologists have been in those areas for years and years and decades, that everything should be mined out by now, that, you know, all the digs that have been done there should have produced as much as we're going to ever see. Is that not the case? And if not, what are they finding, and how is that getting to market? How is that getting to you and I?
It's an excellent question, and I often get asked that, is there really anything left to find or to loot? Because really I concentrate in this aspect of my research on the looting of these sites. And yes, let me just say there are thousands of untapped sites still left for both scientific investigation and, sadly, for looting. So how it works in the area of the world where I work, and I'm only speaking for the Middle East because people who collect material from Central and South America, they're a completely different beast. So at the sites, looters know that you maybe want a pot from biblical Sodom, or what's perceived to be biblical Sodom. So people will dig those pots up that are buried in tombs next to people. They don't care about the human remains, they're more interested in the pots. So they loot the pots, and then somebody in a big black car from, and that's how it was
Somebody
described.
rich from a big black car?
That's how it was described to me,
Okay.
from either Amman, the big city of Amman, or the nearest big city, which is Karak, will come and buy that material. And then it goes from Amman, trades through some hands, and ends up at a border and crosses into the Israeli market through various nefarious ways and a laundering system.
What's the worst case of looting that you've seen that wound up in either a black market or a real market that a legitimate buyer bought?
So the site that I work at is an early Bronze Age site, so about 3600 BCE or to 3200. The site is almost completely tapped out. There are over.
And this is where?
This is along the Dead Sea Plain in Jordan.
Okay.
There are over 3,700 looters' holes. So since the late 1980s, people have been digging there. It's those pots that I'm following. So there's looting at that site, which we are monitoring yearly, and then the pots from that site are somehow making their way onto the Israeli market. And everybody wants a pot from the city of sin. So if you market it like that, and that's how they're being marketed from Sodom or from the time of the patriarchs, that's appealing to the consumer. And so that's how these things are entering the market.
We're talking with Maura Kersel, who's an associate professor of anthropology at DePaul University up in Chicago, and she's here at UofL to talk about, as we're talking right now, about the looting of archaeological sites. What do you tell people when you go talk to them and they say, because most folks, we're not out looking for some ancient piece of pottery or something like that. What is our role in stopping this looting or keeping the market legitimate?
This is an excellent question. I'm really glad you brought it up because the one thing that I want to get across is that I'm not against looting. I'm against looting. I'm against looting. I'm not against collecting because collecting has gone on for generations. It finds its origins in the pilgrims and the relic trade of the 4th century. So it's not going away. But what we need are sophisticated collectors who ask the questions about where this artifact comes from. Does it have a legal provenance or background history, and can I legitimately export it out of the country? And if you're buying something in the licensed market in Israel, all of those things should be true. But you need to ask the dealer for the export license that accompanies your artifact that you're purchasing.
Gotcha. So what's your next piece of research? What if we have you come back to UofL 2 years from now, what are you going to tell us where you've been and what you're looking at?
Excellent question. So my next area of research, because I'm fundamentally interested in how law affects the average archaeologist, and we have a law that allows for a legal trade, legal. So that's what, so that's the research I'm doing now. Next, I'm going to look at a country that has banned the trade in antiquities and whether that law is protecting their archaeological sites.
Is it working?
Right, and whether that's working.
What country is that?
Well, I haven't
tell
quite,
me?
no,
Oh.
I could tell you, but I haven't quite narrowed it
Figured it out
down.
yet,
I'm
huh?
thinking either, because I want to stay in my sphere of knowledge, so somewhere in the Eastern Mediterranean, perhaps Cyprus or Greece.
Okay.
So.
All right, well, very good. Maura Kersel, thanks so much for joining us.